So I wanted to give a very quick update as to what the next section of my project going on are going to be. I know you guys have heard me talk in the past about this quite specific pink dress. It is pretty much, it's all crocheted up, so it has a longer skirt to it, as you can see there. And it's really nice. It's got a good length to it. It all fits. One issue that I happen to have is that it is in fact fairly see-through. And I would like for this to be slightly less see-through, which means I'm going to need to line this particular dress. Interesting side note, as you've heard me talk about before, I don't sew. We've now found ourselves at a slight bit of an impasse. In order for me to make the lining for this particular pink dress, it looks like I'm going to have to bite the bullet and actually learn how to sew. I understand sewing in theory. I have watched lots and lots and lots and lots of videos on it, but that is not really a good substitute for actually doing the work. And luckily for me, I happen to have a really nice local fabric store that I can go to and go get some of my supplies. So, what I have decided, which may or may not be the greatest of ideas, is to make, this is a McCall's pattern. It is 8053. And this is sizes 16 to 18, so this should fit me based on the little measurement things here at the back. And for those of you who have never opened up a sewing pattern before, I know what this looks like because my mom used to sew a whole bunch, this is actually going to be kind of in three parts. You're going to have the outside little jacket here, and on the back we'll have a bunch of technical information on what your measurements are and what your sizing is going to be based on your sizing, how much fabric, or they call them notions, but that would be things like thread, buttons, zippers, things like that. How much of all that you're going to need. And so this has several different styles on it. And so on the back, the reason there's so much writing in here is because it's going to tell you the different requirements per pattern. Anyway, inside of here, you're going to have at least two, but possibly more things. One, the instructions. What the instructions are going to do is they're going to show you how to lay out your pattern pieces and then how to sew it together. Like, what are the steps in the recommended order in order to make this piece. Hold on to the instructions. Basically, no matter what it is, hold on to the instructions. At least look through them, even if you know you're going to change them later on. Please look through them as a person who has written instructions. At least give them a once over. So, inside the little packet, we're going to have instructions, which I will definitely be reading. And then you'll have very carefully folded tissue paper pattern pieces. That's it. That's it. That's all the pieces. And these are going to be very strategically folded. Mine, I'm very lucky, mine is uncut because I can't remember where. I think my partner's dad found this at one of his auctions that he goes to, and brought a whole bunch of patterns home. And I snagged this one. But one thing that I know we're going to do with these pattern pieces is, rather than going in and cutting out each tissue paper piece, because I don't have a second one of these, so if something happens to this, I have a problem. I'm going to take I bought some wrapping paper today, just inexpensive wrapping paper. And I'm going to take and trace out each of my pattern pieces onto the wrapping paper, cut those out, and then use those for pinning and actually cutting out my fabric. Just so that this part can stay safe, because like I said, I don't have a second one of these. It's not like I have another one of these to go to, and because this is not a digital pattern, one of the cool things is now people have digital patterns. So you could, if you were buying one or you were getting one for free, you could just print out the section, tape it together, and cut it out. And so if something happened, you could just reprint that section. Like I said, I can't do that. So, what are the pieces we have? I have this very cute fabric to work with. Some little mushrooms and flowers. I'm going to be doing a short-sleeved button-down shirt. So I figured that would be rather adorable and colorful and should go with a whole bunch of pretty much anything I have in my closet. I'll be able to pair with this. The next thing I also have is interfacing. I have enough for multiple shirts, so no, I will not be using all of this interfacing in one project. I have enough to make like 3 shirts. And I'll show you the other fabrics in a second. I'm also very lucky in that my fabric store, it's not my fabric store, I don't own it, but the fabric store that is near me also has a bunch of buttons. These are the ones that I'm going to use because I feel like it will match the fabric pretty well. For anybody who doesn't know, I have fallen in love with buttons. Like I said, the fabric store up near me has a large variety of buttons. You guys can't see it here, but I have 4 jars, large jars of buttons up above me, all separated out into their little parts like this, little tiny bags. But so the fabric store I go to has a bunch of these, and they literally come in bags just like this, and they're about 50 cents a piece. So I buy a lot of them because in some other places, buttons are not cheap. And if you live in a place where you don't have a fabric store, you will very quickly realize that buttons are not cheap, and the selection in like box stores can be very limited. I'm pretty happy that I'm able to have what I have, and there's a bunch of nice vintage items so that, you know, if I want sparkly things, I can get sparkly things. So I have enough fabric here for 3 shirts, and I figure after doing 3 shirts, I should have the start, the beginning inklings of how to seam things together, which is going to be very interesting because I also don't own a sewing machine, so all of this is going to have to be done by hand, at least for the first one. We'll see what's going to happen with the next few. I may just have to, there may be breaking down. I said I wasn't going to do this, but here we are. Oh, because I want to line one pink dress. Anyway, so the next couple steps, like I said, I'm going to take the wrapping paper that I bought, copy my sewing pattern pieces onto the wrapping paper, cut them out, label, be sure to label everything, and I'm going to then pre-wash my fabric, and then I'll get my fabric all cut out. So this can be a collaborative process because I have no idea what I'm doing. And I figure if I'm going to fail, hopefully you guys can all learn from my mistakes. Anyway, we're not going to fail. We're going to succeed. We're going to succeed. This is going to be a positive endeavor. Hey everyone. It is the next day in our great adventure here. So, since last night, I have gone ahead and got everything out of the pattern packet here. I did end up having to cut out the tissue paper pieces because trying to trace those onto wrapping paper so that I can make a sturdier copy was just not happening. So I ended up cutting them out, tracing all the tissue paper pieces, and then cutting them out of wrapping paper and labeling and putting on all of my markings. So just so you can see here, this is a pocket and it is literally wrapping paper. So I went through and I have measured everything. I have put my lines on. This is my little marking for grain line. Oh, what number they are, because all of these are numbered. This is actually a really simple thing because there's only 11 pieces total for all of these. I'm not going to be using all of them. I am doing view D, which would be that short sleeved one right there. And I'm not doing any pockets on it because I don't like pockets on my shirts. So I have everything here. You can tell like some of these they're big pieces. That's the thing I've noticed with sewing is that the pieces are way bigger than you think they're going to be. But I have everything all labeled and all cut out, and I found out you can in fact iron. That's so silly. You can iron the wrapping paper so that it doesn't curl or curl as much. So if you were to look over here, you can kind of see a little bit of it, but you'll notice that none of this is curling, like literally. Like it's not really curling up like a lot of wrapping paper does. If you've ever, you've wrapped a present, you know that paper just like spirals up. But if you put your iron on super low heat and do the blank side, I found out you can in fact iron it and it will lay flat. So yay! I do recommend if you're going to do that, like test it out on a little piece first before you try to do that to any of your big pieces. Because that, one, you don't want to hurt your iron, and two, you don't want to have to trace and cut all these out again because that was a very involved, tedious task that I was not a huge fan of. But the cool thing is that in theory, once I have this done, like I have, I should not have to do it again unless something happens to these pieces. And because I will have all of my originals in here, all safe and sound, I can then take and put this in a safe place, and then I can put my instructions back with it when I'm finished. Because I'm going to start the pinning, cutting out process pretty soon, I have my my little instruction packet out. I have read through them and, just go through step by step. That is the plan. So I took all my fabric, I have pre-washed it, I have ironed it because it was kind of a little wrinkly and I want it to be as flat as possible. So I have gone ahead and ironed it. I have my my makeshift ironing board over here because, again, when you don't sew and you don't normally iron your clothes because you knit them, you don't have an ironing board. But I have other stuff that I can do to make an ironing board, so that's working out. And I don't want to invest in a big clunky ironing board if I'm not sure that this is something I'm going to stick with, or if this is just a short-term thing so that I can learn a particular skill to line it. All of this is so that I can learn how to put things together to line one dress. Please keep that in mind. So I don't know if I'm going to, I don't want to invest in an ironing board if it would only be for a week and then I'd be done with it. And then I have this big clunky ironing board that there's nothing wrong with, but I'm never going to use again. So I have a makeshift ironing board and that's working out well. But I'm going to start pinning and cutting out. I do have my chalk, so I will be able to incorporate all of my markings. And I'll have all of my pieces up there labeled. And I do need to mark on here. You will notice sometimes you'll have a solid line that says a hemline, that's a little dashed line. And that is literally where I'm supposed to sew, which is 5/8 of an inch in. I know because I measured for all of them, all of the pieces. I was 3 3 hours today doing that. Yay. Anyway, I have a lot more respect for people who do patterns now than I did before. I mean, like, I already respected people before, but like, I have a lot more respect because this was interesting. Anyway, I have my little dash line so I know where to sew because, again, I don't own a sewing machine, so I'm doing everything by hand. Again, I don't want to invest in a sewing machine if I'm only going to really use it for a couple projects and then it's just going to gather dust. I've had sewing machines and that's happened to them before, like they just ended up in the closet and I never touched them. And I don't want to do that again. So we're doing stuff by hand for now. But in a little bit, once my brain has gotten back together again, I will pull out my fabric and I will follow the instructions. Read your instructions. Inside of here, again, if you've never seen any of these patterns before, this one's actually really simple because it only has like one page. And this looks like a lot, but keep in mind it has many variations on it for different sleeve lengths and stuff like that. But inside of here, you're going to have a layout for where to put your pattern pieces on your fabric in order to make it the most economical use. This is their suggestion. There are not a whole lot of pieces where it's like you have to put them in a certain spot. As long as you have your pieces and your grain line is correct, from my understanding, it should be okay. The one exception is going to be my back piece because that has to be put on the fold. Must be put on the fold because it's so wide. Why would you make one giant pattern piece for something that is going to be symmetrical and mirror image? So that piece has to go on the fold. But the rest of them do not. Anyway, I am going to go pin these and cut them out, and I'll get back to you when I've finished with that. So I have everything all cut out. There are my fronts right here. So I have my two cloth fronts and then 2 things of interfacing. I have my collar in 2 pieces along with the interfacing. That's right up there. My sleeves, my back. A little bit of leftover fabric. I couldn't lay it out exactly like it had in the pattern diagram because it turns out I had a snag or a cut. It's kind of a weird one, right in the middle of the fabric. And then this is a little bit of the leftover interfacing. And so, fun thing, this interfacing has a bumpy side. And then it has a smooth side. And so now I need to figure out which side goes down on the fabric for me to iron on, because this is iron-on interfacing. So next morning, here's everything I have done so far. These are the fronts, and I've gone ahead and put the fusible interfacing on both of them. And then I'm going to fold up this edge by 1/4 inch. This one hasn't been sewn yet, it's just pinned. I'm going to iron that really super flat, and then I'm going to sew that down. And then on this piece here, I've actually already done that. And then on the outside, the right side of the fabric, so this one, you are going to sew along the edge, and then you're going to sew another seam 1/4 inch in from that. The thing that I found that really helped me, because I am hand sewing everything, is to go ahead and chalk all the measurements, and then it gives me a line to follow. So as you can see here, let me zoom in. I actually think that looks not too shabby for my first attempt. You can really see a difference between this one here, which I did not use a chalk line. It's kind of everywhere. Luckily that's on the inside, so it doesn't really matter. And here, I did use a chalk line, and it's a lot smoother. Plus my stitches are more even, and that's just going to take practice. You're also going to notice here,
this. I'm back stitching everything because to me it just seems way more secure. And then as soon as I'm done and start a new thread, I'm going ahead and tying everything off, securing it pretty well, and then weaving in my ends. So I actually don't have any extra threads. And I'm not sure if on this I am going to fell this edge down. I might do it, I might not. It depends on once I get the I can pull back from there. It'll depend on what happens when I get the hem and everything else on. So if that's going to hold flat, then that's cool. But that's where we're at so far. Today's trick, between everything else I've got going on, get this edge done and then get those two seams, because that one's going to get sewn, this is going to get folded over, and then I'm going to iron it really, really well, which is something that everybody that I've listened to who does sewing says iron everything, and it really did help me when I was hand sewing, because then my cloth didn't want to shift, or wanted to shift less, should I say. Anyway, that's where we're at. So here's where I'm at after last night. This is the collar, and the collar is done in 4 pieces. This is the top of the collar here, and that is technically in 2 pieces. I just finished sewing that together last night and totally didn't think to film. And then you have the base of the collar, and that is in 2 pieces. So you're going to take the top of the collar, lay them right sides together, sew along the edge, and then clip your corners so you get this nice little point. And then you have to do a thing called grading. And so that's where I took the seam allowance, cut the seam allowance in half, and then I went on the fusible side and I cut that in half. Down so you had this little teeny tiny bit running down here. And that's so that this edge doesn't get super bulky. And don't worry about the little white marks on there. Those are my chalk marks, so I know where to sew. Then you take that whole thing, you flip it inside out, poke out your corners, iron it flat, and then sew along the edge here as an edge stitch. Now, I watched a video on this, and their edge stitch looked a little bit different, but based on the pictures in the pattern, this is what it kind of looks like, where you have 2 in my case, semi-parallel lines of stitching that are 1/4 inch apart. So I'm going to go with what's in the pattern. Plus it's already done and I'm not taking it out again. So there. But you do an edge stitch and then you do top stitching, basically to hold everything in place. From there, I don't know if you can see, I have big old giant basting stitches. That's what this string is. And I haven't tied it off so I can pull it out really easy. Then you take the base of your collar, so your second half. You lay the top of your collar on top of that, baste it together, line everything up, baste it together. Then you take the other part of the bottom, so this piece matches that one, okay? Fold it up 5/8 of an inch, line it up, pin it, and then I went ahead and chalked this line on here, and that is my stitching line. Now, fun thing, so this says that I'm supposed to stitch along the unfinished edge. So basically everywhere where you see this chalk line. Not this one, because that's my center chalk line. It's just telling me where the center of the collar is. I don't know if anybody else has done the math, but that's going to be a lot of fabric that I have to sew through. So I'm not sure how well this particular part of the plan is going to work out, because I've got a lot of fusible interfacing, and that has been difficult to hand sew through. Just because it's medium weight interfacing. I wasn't really, the pattern didn't tell me what to get. It just said get interfacing. Didn't tell me what kind. So I'm going to see how that works out. But then I'm supposed to take this and then flip this down and iron it. And then I'm going to work on attaching this to my shirt. But that's where we're at, is getting the collar done. This is like the most complicated piece thus far because there's a lot of moving parts to it. The front of the shirt took longer just because the seams on the front are longer. But that actually wasn't very difficult at all. I say that this is the most complicated part because I haven't touched the sleeves yet, and sleeves tend to be interesting, but again, this pattern looks really straightforward and simple, so I don't imagine too much frustration. I mean, I set in sleeves all the time in my knitting, so I'm not sure why this would be much different. I say that as someone who hasn't done it, so maybe in a couple days we can all laugh about that statement together. Not really sure, but yeah. Okay, so this may be a little bit hard to see, but I've got the collar here all sewn together, and I have that edge graded. This is what I was talking about earlier, where I cut down this outside edge, cut it in half, and then cut this part in half again. Then turned it right side out, right side out, and pressed it as flat as I can. Now, according to the directions, I am to take this edge here and line it up with my shirt around the neck, line up these little things, and then try to get this as flat as one can, sewing two curves together. And after that, I'm going to then turn all of this up and stitch this edge down onto here. Sorry about that. I'm stitching this edge, which is my folded over edge, to the inside. And then after that, I'm supposed to do top stitching around the collar itself. So around here, and around the bottom, and then it will be done. I think it's going to work out really well. I just have to remember which side, the nice looking side of my stitching is on. All right, so we got the collar on. It's right here. Again, little chalk lines. But what I had to do was I took the collar on the outside here, put it right sides together, sewed up this edge, and then turned it on the inside. It's probably a little easier to see right here. And then I stitched that down. And you can tell I was getting a little bit tired there. And then you go along and you edge stitch right here. Now, technically there's supposed to be another line of edge stitching in here, but I don't think I'm going to put that in. Simply because when you get over to these corners here, this has multiple layers of cloth and multiple layers of interfacing all together. Just remember this here on the front, that's a layer of interfacing, plus 2 layers of cloth, plus another layer of interfacing, plus all the layers of cloth, and it's thick. It is very thick. And I still need to put a button and or buttonhole on both sides. Well, a button or buttonhole. You wouldn't put the button and the buttonhole in the same spot. That's kind of silly. It's early. I haven't had a lot of coffee. Anyway, so I'm probably not going to do that extra line of stitching there. But we have a collar. And this part does fold down here so that you can actually see. There is, right there, there's our collar. And I think overall it doesn't look too shabby. And my one pucker, I got one, kind of both sad and somewhat impressed that I only got one pucker. Just one. And it's very tiny. It's right there. You probably couldn't even see it if I didn't point it out to you. And so after this, then I just need to put in my sleeves. They're short sleeves, so that should be pretty easy to do. Like, quit freaking out. So that should be pretty easy to do. and then hem up my sleeves. I don't have to worry about any darts or tucks or anything like that because I'm not doing long sleeves. It literally is just fold it up and hem it, and then seaming up my sides, and the real trick is going to be buttons and buttonholes. So we're actually on the way to being done. Woot! Okay, so here's where I'm at in the shirt. I went ahead and I've got the sleeve all sewn in and my seams all pressed. I have the side seams all done. So you can, let me open this up so you can actually see what it looks like. So I have the sleeves set in and all pressed. I have the side seams right here done and pressed. Not a huge fan of this seam because it's all got edges. I have lots of fray checks, so that really shouldn't be too much of an issue. But my instructions don't say to do anything with that, so we're leaving it. Now, up here on the sleeve, you can kind of see I've already pressed this down, but I haven't sewn it yet. You are going to press a 1/4 inch in and then fold this in another inch. And then stitch it down, and that part's done. And then down here at the very bottom for the hem, if I can get this to lay flat. Lay flat. Flat! Okay, there we go. This is the same kind of deal. You roll it and then roll it again. My hem was a bit uneven, so I started off at the other end and then used that as my base because that was the shortest, and then I just made everything match up, and then I've pinned it. I don't think I'm going to have to clip anything on the inside. I've got it to kind of, through stretching and pressing and all that, I got it to do what it's supposed to do. But just so you guys can see what this is supposed to look like, or what I have made it look like, you can see here, if it comes into focus. So this is my edge, and then I have it very carefully stitched in. So I have a longer stitch on the inside, and then I'm picking up like 1 to 2 threads here. And on this side, you can see it, kind of, right there, right in here. If you know what you're looking for and you're super duper close, I figure anybody who notices this seam and says anything to me about it, we need to have a serious conversation on personal space. That is my theory. And the same thing up here, I've finished off the sleeve. It's the, if I can get this to come into focus, that'd be awesome. It is the same principle here. This little edge got folded over. This got folded up that extra inch, and then very carefully stitched down. And I don't even think you could, yeah, you can barely see right there. The stitch is holding it down. So I just have to finish off the other sleeve and then the hem, and then put on buttons, and then we're done. Well, no. The shirt is done. I will be making notes on all of the stuff that I would like to do a little bit differently. So that's kind of what's going on with the shirt. It is coming along slowly but surely. And by the way, just in case anyone was wondering, yeah, seriously press your seams as you go, because this looks pretty nice, and it wouldn't look nearly that nice if I didn't press it. But I figured I would go ahead and show you guys the other thing I was working on yesterday, which is that I have cleaned up my craft area. This was basically all yesterday. So up here we have buttons and more buttons. So I was talking about earlier where I said I have lots of them. Those are all full, by the way, of literally just buttons. There's just a cute frog because there's cute frogs. Up here we've got scrappy stuff. I should actually just show you. It's just, these are all of my yarn ends, yarn scraps, single, partial balls, and stuff like that. And that lives up there for the moment. If I can get that, actually had that looking nice for a second. And then all of the yarns, that's my phone, but fabric-y stuff, extra crap down there. And then, hey, look, it's a light. And then we have like little weird personal stuff, all of my crochet hooks, knitting needles, pins, belt buckles. Yes, I have an entire jar of belt buckles, believe it or not. My local fabric store has all of this stuff, and sometimes they have things like that are on sale. It's like they bought out an older fabric stores or older craft stores or clothing shops, and then they just sell off all the dead stock and back stock. So you may have, like, let me show you. If I can do this one-handed, probably not. I can. So you just have belt buckles like these. You know, or there's a more traditional looking belt buckle, but they'll have them for like 20 cents, 40 cents. So I buy them when I'm in. So I have several each of those. And then we have other little weird crafty stuff. That's the doorstop from the house I grew up in. And my current thing of sewing patterns. There's not a whole lot of them, but I have books of how to make sewing patterns, so okay, that's a thing. And then down here, these are all sweaters that I'm going to work on redesigning. Those are just the ones I have pulled out right now. Except for the green one, because that one's sentimental. It's the first sweater I ever made that I designed. So anyway, this is what I was up to yesterday. I think it actually looks pretty nice. I moved all of my books into the other room because you guys might not be able to see this, but these shelves here, these ones, are not very wide, or not very deep. So whenever I put my books on them and I went to go take them off, like the whole shelf would rattle. And when you have lots of glass things on there, and I used to keep my needles up there, my pins up there, when you have lots of glass things that have other pokey things in them, you really don't want to have your shelf wiggle. So, like I said, I went ahead and did some organization. I think it looks nice. Doing stuff like that I find is really helpful, not just for, my own mental health, but it also makes finding things a lot easier. And because this is out in the open in a high traffic area where there's lots of light, I am not actually concerned about ever getting clothes moths or anything like that, because they want someplace that is secluded and quiet and dark. It is none of these things. So I try to keep it like that so that this is the least appealing place for them to be. So I am not worried about having huge amounts of yarn just kind of like sitting out. The same thing with my cloth down here. Don't have a whole lot of cloth, but that may change. We'll see. We'll see. I told myself I wasn't going to learn how to sew, but now I'm learning how to sew, and I was up last night thinking about how to fix seams and things like that. So that's what's happening. That is the danger about learning new skills. All of a sudden you get really interested in them, and your brain starts getting all kinds of new ideas, and it starts firing on a whole bunch of cylinders you didn't know you had. And it's awesome, and you learn new stuff, and life is better. And that's the danger of learning new skills. Anyway, I'm rambling, so I'm going to go ahead and shut up for now. We've gotten here over to the buttonholes. What I've done is I watched a bunch of videos on this, and then I created a little sample thing. So I have my interfacing, my fabric, my interfacing, and another strip of fabric to mimic the shirt that you kind of see up there. And I watched several videos on how to do hand-done buttonholes. And I took and marked out the approximate size. Spoiler alert, I did mine a little small. So make your buttonholes, my recommendation, make your buttonholes a little bit bigger than you think that they need to be to accommodate for all the extra stitches. So let's zoom in. Here you can see this. I need it to focus. This is my very first attempt. It is not terrible and not, it is functional. Let's put it that way, it's functional. And up here, this is a partially finished buttonhole. This is my separate one, and this is when I went over with using what they were calling GIMP. I don't have any GIMP, so I just used some of the yarn that I happen to have in my stash. It's the same approximate color. And as you can tell, this one I think looks a lot nicer. I think that this plumps out the edge of the buttonhole pretty well. And here I actually finished the whole thing off. I was trying a little interesting end thing, which I did not end up doing. And here I tried the other where it's just the back and forth. You can tell here I was getting a little bit tired because my stitches were a little bit uneven. Making buttonholes is not difficult, but it is time consuming and you need to be a little bit precise. So that was everything I've done with these buttonholes, and this is my practice piece. On to the actual piece. I went ahead and, like I said, added in my buttonholes. Here you will notice that there's a pink color back here, and that is because the blue that I was using is acrylic, and I will need to iron this shirt, as I found out. So I ended up going up with the pink, which, like, once you have the button done, you don't really, like, see anything. But I figure if you're staring at my buttonholes and being that judgmental about them, we can just talk about personal space. It's my first shirt. I don't care. I'm pretty proud of it. So I laid out my buttonholes, and I have the buttons that line up roughly with them. I did not put one. I have one marked out on this side for the collar. You can see here what I kind of did. I basted it around the edge, and I've got to take that out. But I ended up not putting one at the collar simply because, one, this is very thick. There's lots of layers there, and there's not a lot of space. And two, I'm never going to button the top button, so it doesn't matter. I got the sleeves all done, so those are all sewn in. Ooh, gotta trim that. We're just going to pretend like you didn't see that little end. And I got the edge down here at the hem at the very bottom. This part all done. And here you can see the inside and what it looks like. It is not perfectly flat, but I didn't want to clip this curve because I felt that with hand sewing, it would fray a lot more. So I did not do that. And you can kind of see part of my dilemma right here. This edge is raw. My directions did not give me anything there about how to finish this off so that it does not fray. So I may go back in and fell or make some bias tape or something to stop this from fraying. I do not know what that is going to be yet. And so yeah, now it's we've just got to do the reveal on this one. Let's show it off. So here's the shirt, and it is all done. What are the things that I liked about it? What are some of the things that I didn't care so much for? And what would I change? What did I like about it? First off, it was pretty easy to put together. The instructions were fairly clear, even for a noob like me. The pattern pieces, once you got them, they just kind of fit together. There was nothing that I felt was too horribly complicated other than dealing with parts of the collar, but there's not really a great way to show in a single still image how to do something that requires lots of flipping and turning inside out. That is part of you just kind of have to trust the process. I would say for this particular shirt's a little bit big on me, although I do not think that is
a fault of the pattern or anything like that. I just think that I've got the wrong size. I did not take into account the amount of ease that the shirt was going to provide. One of the other things that I would change is down here at the bottom of the shirt. I'll see if I can get a picture for you. It curves in towards the center and comes up over where the hips are, and then comes back in on the back. It's pretty standard on a lot of dress shirts. I hated sewing that. I really did. Not a huge fan of that specific curve. I can, with an iron and lots of steam and some patience, get that to lie flatter, but it's not as neat as I would like. Also, on the inside, there are certain finishing things, like finishing off the edges to my seams, simply because they are raw. I'm not a big fan of that, so I'm going to sit down and figure out ways that I can reinforce those seams, because again, I am hand stitching. If I were to have like a serger or overlock, depending on what side of the pond you're on, machine to work with, that wouldn't be an issue, because then I would just serge the edges and it wouldn't matter. I don't have that, so I need to figure out another plan. So I have enough fabric here for 2 more shirts. So part of my plan is I want to try one where I change part of the body, basically have the same kind of width to it, but change the bottom edge so that it's flat, and then simply has like a little slit right over my hip. Here's this one. There's the reveal. Hope you guys liked, and thanks for sticking around. So, have fun. Make stuff.